Welcome to the Blue Water Outlook Weekly Water Outlook recorded on March 17th, 2013. Well, for many areas of the nation, it was a very quiet week last week. If you look at the Southwest and Western U.S., no rain fell at all, and actually the upper Midwest, very light amounts of rain. The only significant rain occurred over the eastern third of the U.S., and even that was fairly modest. Now you look at that area in yellow, that was 2 to 3 inches of rain across parts of Mississippi, small part of Alabama into the Ohio Valley. That was the only really significant rainfall. Now there's still this track of more active snow. I'll be talking about that a bit, and that continued to be active over the last week from parts of North Dakota, mainly eastern North Dakota, Minnesota into Wisconsin. That's been active for quite some time, and it's going to be active this week as well. Now, if we look at the percent of normal precipitation for the last week, what we see is well below normal rainfall and snow. 25% of normal or less over a very broad part of the nation. The areas in blue are the areas of above normal precipitation. You can see that those are very small areas in coverage, with most of the nation receiving well below normal rainfall. Now, I mentioned last week would be very quiet, and it was pretty quiet across the nation with the exception of some snow over the upper Midwest into the Great Lakes and some pockets of heavier rain over the Southeast U.S. Now, the pattern of snow so far this winter, even though it has been accumulating fairly significantly over the upper Midwest and parts of the Great Lakes, it continues to really not expand southward at all. It's really been in this path now, this track that's been defined over the eastern part of North Dakota, a large part of Minnesota, parts of Wisconsin and Michigan, but not much at all further south of there. Any snow that has accumulated south of there has melted, or it's not all that significant at this time. But the snow over that northern tier of the state or the nation has been fairly significant. But again, I think it's a key point that it hasn't expanded further south. If we look at the snow water equivalents, they're beginning to add up. We're getting into that maroon, and that's over 3 inches of water equivalent over northern and eastern parts of North Dakota and Minnesota. But look how fast it drops off. South Dakota, western South Dakota, 0 water equivalent, and really not all that significant over parts of Nebraska, and sort of a mix over Iowa. Some recent snow has produced about 1 inch, but for the most part, like I've said, it's very confined as of getting into late winter and eventually into early spring. This is a quick look at a 7-day average stream flow across the nation. Large parts of the nation are in normal stream flow for this time of year. That's green. However, there are areas of below normal stream flow. That's the areas in orange or brown. The Southwest and Western U.S. continue to have rainfall deficits that extend into the winter months. Consequently, stream flow remains below normal in those areas. Now, there's been a heavier amount of rain and snow over parts of the Midwest. You can see the area blue along parts of Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri. That's about the only consistent area of above normal stream flow on the average basis across the nation. If we look at the drought monitor, I think the story has been fairly static over the last week or so. Prior to that, it was pretty active. We were seeing some significant improvements over the Southeast U.S., some improvements over parts of the core of drought over the Midwest. But recently it's quieted down, and that's going to be a theme of my briefing today, is really activity quieting down. Not as much changes in the drought monitor, and I think I'd have to say more persistence over the middle part of the nation, persistence over the Southeast U.S. after some recent improvements over that area. In fact, I wanted to talk a bit about the difference between upper soil moisture and lower soil moisture, because that's going to have a very important role over the next month. The area in green here, the dark green, shows very significant enhancements, changes in soil moisture over the last 30 days over the Southeast U.S. Due to heavier rain over parts of Iowa and Minnesota due to some heavier snow. But these are very recent trends, and you have to keep in mind that the lower soil moisture has seen persistent deficits over many months, if not a year, and the upper soil moisture is going to be percolating into that lower soil deficit region, and it's going to dry out those upper soils much quicker than would be normal. I'm going to point this out in another way here. I'm going to talk about short-term drought indicators and long-term drought indicators. Short-term drought indicators are parameters that can change very quickly. Some of these can include upper soil moisture and stream flow. I'm going to show a graph in just a minute of longer term, and those would be reservoirs, some stream flow, and groundwater, which takes some time. But if we look at the short-term drought indicators, look over the Southeast U.S. You see some green and blue. That's saying in the short term it has been more conducive to upper soil moisture recharge. Consequently, we see some improvement in stream flow, perhaps a bit of inflows into reservoir levels over those regions. We also see some in the upper Midwest in that area of green. That would be areas of improvement due to additional rain and snow, and in fact there's been some flooding in that region. But I think to really look at the soil moisture and drought situation, we have to look not just short term but long term. Again, if we focus in on the Southeast U.S. here over that area of green, for long term we're still seeing at best normal conditions and other areas of below normal, and that's that area in yellow. So keep in mind, until we really solve the drought issue, we have to solve it not just from a short-term perspective, but from a long-term perspective, and recharge not just the far upper soil moisture, but the lower soil moisture. And upper soil moisture has seen some improvement as we would normally see this time of year. Keep in mind, this is caution that does not mean that the drought is over, because until we recharge that lower soil moisture, we're going to still be vulnerable to deficits in upper soil. Now, it'll be interesting over the next couple of weeks. This is the Arctic Oscillation, and I've been looking at the past, but I think this is a good week to look at the future. The red line are an ensemble of the forecast, and the forecast looks like it's going to dip very significantly negative. Matter of fact, I put a green line looking at the past winter months, and if this forecast is right, this will be the most negative phase that we've seen the Arctic Oscillation all winter. Now, what that means is that the polar vortex is going to relax, and that cold air is going to sink south. What it'll mean is colder temperatures, colder than normal over parts of the upper Midwest and eastern U.S. It'll also, as I've mentioned from precipitation trends and patterns, set up a band of thermal tightness, and that could enhance precipitation over a small area. I'll be talking about that in just a bit. So the big picture, I put a lot of squiggly lines here, but the green represents the upper jet stream pattern, and it's going to be a fairly simple pattern for quite some time, probably the rest of the month, due to this strong negative phase Arctic Oscillation, where the jet stream dips over the central part of the U.S. and the eastern U.S. Blue dashed lines mean anomalies, negative anomalies of pressure. So that means colder than normal, more of a dip in the jet stream. So that shows that cold air will be sagging to the south over the upper Midwest, Great Lakes, and the eastern U.S. I wanted to also point out 6 to 10 days out, not a whole lot of change in this pattern. So we're getting into a very stable type negative phase Arctic Oscillation, late winter, early spring pattern. So the precipitation trends are going to be fairly static as we round out March and maybe even get into early April. I don't see a whole lot of change at this time to the pattern. Now, if you're a listener to my briefings, you might have remembered I mentioned the tightening of the thermal gradient. This is a temperature forecast for Thursday of this week. The lighter colors are colder air and the blues and greens are warmer. And typically with this Arctic Oscillation, what you would get is a tightening of a thermal band somewhere over the Southeast U.S. into the mid-Atlantic, and that could be where some enhanced precipitation would develop. Now, this week, it looks like there will be some snow over that snow band of the upper Midwest once again, and some rain and even some severe storms over the Southeast U.S. early this week. These are the surface low tracks, and typically the more enhanced snow will be occurring north of this track, so there could be some snow over parts of the Ohio Valley as well as freezing rain, and then the upper Midwest snow track. Over the Southeast U.S. there will also be some precipitation, including strong storms, but without a surface low developing, most likely it will not transport that much Gulf moisture, and it'll be moving fairly quick, so amounts will be generally modest. Here's the rainfall forecast for the next 7 days, and you can see a couple trends here that I would like to point out. One is this is that snow track. It looks like it's going to continue to be very active from the upper part of the Midwest across Minnesota into the Great Lakes. Looks like we're going to have strong precipitation over the southeast U.S. and then some rain and snow along the northern edge of that along the Ohio River Valley. Now the rain and snow, the rain over the southeast U.S. will occur early in the week and again late in the week. Now I wanted to point out another pattern here. This is the far end of the medium range model into early April. I wanted to point out how it's a fairly benign type pattern. Now having said that, there will be some areas of heavy snow, there will be some possibility of severe storms and some heavy rain, but overall it looks like a fairly quiet pattern with the exception of a few areas of the country, including the Pacific Northwest. Just as importantly are the very dry conditions over the west and southwest. Parts of the west and southwest will continue to get well below normal rainfall through the rest of this month into early April. That will continue to dry out upper soils and continue to have the drought persist in those areas. So the takeaway points, it looks like a fairly stable pattern setting up with a very strong Arctic oscillation, negative Arctic oscillation dominated pattern. Gainers of precipitation would include the Pacific Northwest, parts of the Ohio Valley, parts of the Gulf Coast states, and losers with rainfall deficits would be, once again, the West and the Southwest U.S. We'll be updating this briefing again next Sunday. Thank you for listening.